Have you ever looked at a huge, magnificent tree and thought, man, I wish I could just move that to my backyard? Well, guess what? You actually can, but it's not exactly simple. In fact, it's one of the most delicate, high-stakes operations in the natural world. Okay, let's dive into how this incredible feat of engineering and biology actually works.
So just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, let's look at the numbers. The root ball of a single tree with a 10-inch trunk can weigh up to 8,000 pounds. Yeah, 8,000. That's the weight of a white rhinoceros. And remember, that's just the part you have to dig out of the ground. So that brings us to the central challenge, right? How on earth do you move a living thing that weighs as much as a rhino without, well, killing it? This isn't just heavy lifting, it's a full-on life support operation. The entire process is a high-stakes battle against one primary enemy, a condition known as transplant shock. Think of transplant shock like a patient recovering from major surgery. The tree loses a huge portion of its root system, its entire life support, and is suddenly forced to survive in a brand new environment. Literally, every single step we're about to cover is designed to fight this one, potentially fatal condition. Now, you're probably picturing giant cranes and a dramatic moving day, right? But here's the thing. The most crucial part of the whole process actually starts years before the tree ever leaves the ground. It's the invisible work that makes the entire thing possible in the first place. Let's just look at the full timeline, because it's a big one. This isn't a weekend project. We're starting with a viability check 2 years out. Then, a year before the move, there's this critical procedure called root pruning. Only then do we get to the heavy lifting, which is then followed by a 2-year recovery period. It really is a marathon, not a sprint. And you know, the very first question you have to ask is, can this tree even handle the stress? Because not all trees are created equal. Some, like the sugar maple or American basswood, are pretty tough. They have a high tolerance for this kind of disruption. Others, like the beautiful paper birch or black walnut, are highly intolerant. Moving them is an incredibly high-risk gamble. Now, this next step is where things get really interesting, because it sounds completely backwards. A year before the move, arborists perform what's called root pruning. They are intentionally injuring the tree. But this is like an athlete training for a race. The controlled stress forces the tree to grow a dense network of new, fine feeder roots close to the trunk, creating a compact and resilient root ball for moving day. But how you make that cut is everything. The right way involves exposing the roots and making clean, surgical cuts that heal quickly. The wrong way, using something like a chain trencher, creates jagged, torn wounds that are just an open invitation for disease and decay, potentially dooming the entire project from the very start. So, after years of careful preparation, we finally arrive at the main event, moving day. This is where all that invisible biological work meets some serious brute force engineering. And this chart illustrates exactly why. Look at how the weight just explodes as the tree gets bigger. A small jump in trunk size from 6 to 8 inches doubles the weight of the root ball to 4 tons. This is why you can't just call a landscaper. You need massive, specialized equipment like truck-mounted hydraulic spades and cranes operated by total experts. The protocol on the day is meticulous. First, you mark which side faces north to replant it with the same orientation. This prevents the bark from getting a nasty sunburn. Then, after excavating, the root ball is wrapped in burlap and secured in a wire basket like a patient on a stretcher. And here's the crucial point. You only ever lift by this secured root ball, never ever by the trunk. Okay, the tree has been moved. The hard part's over, right? Wrong. The replanting phase is filled with traps, including one very common mistake where trying to be kind to the tree can actually kill it. It all starts with the hole, and the rules are strict. It must be no deeper than the root ball, so the tree sits on firm, undisturbed soil and doesn't sink. But it should be up to 5 times wider, giving the new roots plenty of loose soil to expand into. Now here's that fatal mistake. It's so tempting to fill that wide hole with rich, fluffy compost and amended soil. But if the surrounding native soil is dense clay, you've just created what's called the bathtub effect. The amended soil acts like a sponge in a clay bowl, trapping water and literally drowning the tree's roots. So the right way to backfill is to use only the native soil that you dug out of the hole. That's it. This ensures the water drains properly from the root ball into the surrounding landscape. The goal is hydraulic continuity, not a nutrient-rich death trap.
We've reached the final and longest phase of the journey,
The tree is in the ground, but the job is far from over. In fact, its survival now depends entirely on the next 2 years of intensive care. That's the minimum commitment. 2 full growing seasons of diligent monitoring. During this time, the tree is incredibly vulnerable as it works to regenerate that massive root system it lost. And the checklist is non-negotiable. Water is the absolute top priority. Mulch is mandatory to conserve that moisture. You avoid fertilizer because the tree needs to focus its energy on growing roots, not new leaves. And you only prune what's dead or broken. The tree needs every leaf it has for photosynthesis to power its recovery.
The watering schedule is particularly vital. It starts daily for the first couple of weeks to establish contact, then tapers off. The goal is always deep, infrequent watering that saturates the root ball, encouraging roots to grow down and deep rather than shallow, frequent sprinkling, which creates a weak, vulnerable root system.
So, as you can see, moving a giant tree isn't a single event. It's a long, interconnected process. A failure in the early root pruning phase, a mistake during the heavy lift, or negligence in the aftercare will doom the entire project. It's a perfect fusion of biology, engineering, and years of patient, dedicated care.
Ultimately, what this shows us is that the tree's journey doesn't end on moving day. In many ways, it's just beginning. And that leaves us with a final thought. What other monumental achievements that we see every day are built on years of slow, meticulous, and often invisible preparation?